Hi, and welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We are sitting in the St. Joe River Yacht Club, going about to head across to Lake Michigan, head all the way to Milwaukee. We're on a 34-dailer. We're doing a story later in this show, a little bit about delivery and a little bit about what it's like having to deliver a boat. We're going to be in the Queen's Cup this week on a 52, Great Lakes 52, which is owned by Wynsma, and we're going to be a part of the race, and more importantly, we're going to be hopefully coming across the lake in pretty good winds on Friday. But we want to talk a little bit about storage. We've got some really good experts on board that we're going to talk about our 10 or 11 hour trip going across the lake. Probably motoring most of it. It's been a bit windy today, but we're going to try and have that opportunity. We're going to take you all the way through what it's like to deliver a boat, something that never really gets covered. I was supposed to go across on the 52 on usual suspects, but we decided some family issues that we're coming across. If you're not sure, Dwayne Burgoyne was nice enough to get us a ride on this 34-dailer, and we're going to have a conversation with him and a bunch of people on the boat. So hopefully this is a good start to what will be a good couple of days. And then when we come back to South Haven, which is where the race for the Queen's Cup 2024 Queen's Cup ends up, we're going to bring you all the stuff over from the South Shore Milwaukee Yacht Club and all the stuff coming into South Haven. But then we're going to finish the weekend on Mary Grace, owned by Kenny Ginger, right here in St. Joe's, and we've done that before, but it's going to be kind of a unique situation. So we're going to talk a lot about the race. We're certainly going to talk a little bit about the Mackinac coming up. We're going to spend some time with Kelly McGee. She was part of the Newport to Bermuda race, and she was part of that. Hopefully that'll be on one of the shows. We're also going to talk to the folks, some folks from the Mills race that were victorious. We're going to get to those guys in the next couple of weeks. That being the case, as we move forward, we'll let the pictures speak for themselves, and stay tuned. As we begin to edit the show, we want you guys to know that there's a couple of situations that we need to make aware of. We had all these great intentions of producing a variety of sidebars and subplots, and the reality is we got stuck out in the middle of Lake Michigan for a better part of 4.5 hours with both of our cameras in the pocket, small little DJI cameras, and the reality to it is we had some film that worked and some film that didn't. So we're going to try and piece together some things that make sense, talk to you about the race, talk to you about racing. But there was a bit of an epiphany for me. I don't think I've ever had greater respect for racers than sitting in the middle of the lake at 3 o'clock in the morning being inundated by Mother Nature with the race, with the water coming down and rain coming down, and watching these professionals on both the boat that I was on, which is certainly Usual Suspects. I learned that I don't like to race. I certainly want to cover it, but I've also gained such great respect for the way these 52 operators, and for that matter, everybody that was in the Cup, the folks that are going to be in the Chicago to Mac. Racing, I don't think, is my thing, but I've had such great respect for what they do and the way they do it and the camaraderie in which they enjoy it. I will forever have respect and certainly the greatest things to say about the folks that get on a race boat. We're going to try and give you a feel of what we did. We did talk to a lot of folks. We're going to piece this together. I'm going to narrate some of the stuff at the bottom. And I wanted to thank Eric and all the crew and all the folks who are involved, and certainly Dar and Dwayne Burgoyne for helping us getting across the lake. Going across was supposed to be an 8 or 9 hour trip. It turned into a longer trip. We're going to eventually do something on some kind of a topic with relates to deliveries, because that in itself is a whole nother discussion. But it's amazing how resilient sail racers are. And again, I say that being a little bit of a fanboy coming to this in a little bit later life. It's unbelievable being able to be around the 52 crew. We had a chance to talk to Kenny Reed. We had a chance to talk to a number of folks. But we're going to put this together. Up next, Charlie Tro was on the boat with us coming across, and I should mention to you that I was actually sitting next to Charlie at the back of the boat. I'd interviewed him about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I mentioned I was looking for Charlie on the same boat with only 13 people, and he said, oh, by the way, it was me. Charlie looks so much younger in person than he does in real life. We got a chance to talk to him for a couple of seconds. So we're going to talk to Charlie about the upcoming Bayview to Mackinac race sponsored by National Fleet Services and all that entails that. We were over in Lake Michigan going back to Macatawa. And then we'll try to put together a little bit of the show and see where that takes us and do some narration and try to make some sense out of it. I think you'll enjoy it. But again, the epiphany of being able to understand just what you guys enjoy has been the best part of this, because have so much respect for what they do. And if you've been on a crew like Heartbreaker, Bob Hughes, and you turn around and come back with somebody like Eric, they're completely different crews, but not any less competitive, not any less passionate. And this is the highlight of the last 5 years for me on a sailboat. So hopefully we'll give you some insight when we'll be back in a minute with Charlie Trust. We're talking real briefly with Charlie Trust, who is the chairman for this year's Bayview Yacht Club's Port Huron and Mackinac race, sponsored by National Fleet Services. You're about 21 days out. Just maybe give us a little primer as to what you're doing, and kind of over 335 boats, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 335 is the number right now, Greg, and thanks for having me on the show. We're actually on Lake Michigan right now, which is a bit of a change of pace for us. So I just finished the Queen's Cup aboard Usual Suspects, and great to have you on for that race. Early Saturday morning here, we're pulling into Nactel Bay Yacht Club, but yeah, as we look to the 100th running of Bayview Mackinac race presented by National Fleet Service, very excited for this to take place here in 21 days, July 20th. Right now, we're focused on the class splits is the next big task on my plate, and as we start to get ORC certificates back, this is the big step. We have sailing instructions being posted on Monday, so very timely, but it's all coming to fruition.
Registration deadline's when?
Registration closed.
Okay.
So the late registration was June 7th. So yeah, we've got a great idea of our boats, and now it's just dividing them up into class splits. And max day flags are ordered. The first place, second place, third place flags are ordered. It's all real. It's all happening. So we're all very.
You got to be pretty pleased with the record number, a large number of boats, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a record number. The last record was set in 1985, and it was 316 boats. So with 335, we're all ecstatic. It just shows a lot of the community support. We've got a great community involvement of sailors who want to be a part of this 100th running of the Mackinac race. So that's awesome for us to see.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time. We'll keep checking in as the race gets closer, and I know you got stuff going on, but we'll certainly keep everybody abreast of what's so thanks for your time.
Greg. Yeah, appreciate it.
Click on running lights, please. Thank you.
Obviously, you can see behind us the St. Joe Yacht Club. We're going to get a chance to know all the folks on board here a little bit later, but we're actually heading out towards Milwaukee and feel the breeze coming. But out to St. Joe's River, and we'll be back a little bit later. Someplace in the middle of Lake Michigan, we are enjoying what looks to be some pretty large waves. You guys can see those behind me. We'll pull that out in a second. But what's interesting is you guys obviously know that I'm not a open water sailor, but we've been on the boat now for about five and a half hours. It'll probably be another 5 hours before we get into Milwaukee. But being the oldest guy in the boat, I just thought you might guys find this to be somewhat interesting. Let me turn this around, and you'll see that in just a second. You guys will follow this down. You'll see everybody sleeping from below. These are all really good sailors. These are all younger guys, but they're all sleeping. So the reality to it is the guys here in the back are having some fun with this. We're going to have a conversation with them a little bit later, but I was just enjoying having some fun with the idea that there's the three oldest guys in the boat are up in here enjoying having a conversation, and they're all down sleeping.
So I mean, it might have something to do with like how much have we learned in all this time that they're wrapped and we're enjoying it. So it's nice. It's not
10 years I can sleep in my grave. Right now I'm going to watch as much as I can.
A lot of creative energy happening here.
All right, so let's get some good looks at this, what looks like waves. We're looking at, as we look at 15, 16 knots of wind at this point. We were looking a little bit earlier at waves probably 3.5 to 5 feet.
Yeah.
And probably looking at 20 knots coming out. So this has been a pretty fun run. As you can see the landscape of this. For some of us, for us, a lot of us new guys, this is brand new. So anyway, we hope that we're not going to bring you a whole lot from coming across the lake, except to say it's just a long trip. And we're certainly kind of enjoying it. And we'll come back. Well, we're waiting for an Uber here. We're up in the Pabst Hotel area, the brew house. We'll take a few pictures of that. Yesterday was a long 12-hour ride across Lake Michigan from St. Joe's, and a rough one in heavy weather. I can tell you that delivering boats, we're going to do a story later on that in the season. Yesterday we were just trying to get across the lake. But if you look at a chance to look at the area here, it's pretty cool. And part of the process with this, I'm going to turn this around a little bit, get a chance to see all the stuff in downtown Milwaukee, which is kind of unique. There's the brew house, which is an interesting place. Turns out that I think if you stay in any downtown, you're going to spend a lot of money for a room that looks like every other Hotel 6. But other than that, it's a pretty cool town. Ran into Sam, who's part of the Usual Suspects crew. Sam and I are going to share an Uber down to the South Lake Milwaukee Yacht Club, and I think somewhere in the next hour the rain stops. The good part for me, let me pull this back around. The good part for me is that the ride back is a lot faster, a lot more fun than the ride over. So we'll check that, and we'll be back in a little bit.
Left and then right and then left. All right. Ready?
First half is going to be good. It's going to be easy. It's going to be, hiking and all that stuff. Second half, everyone will. It's not going to be a surprise. We're going to be doing the weather modeling, and we'll know what's coming. But just everyone in your mind, be prepared that it could be a lot of different sails in the middle of the night. Safety, 100%. Stay on the boat. This is a warm-up course, so let's all be safe and have fun.
Do you see us starting in the J3?
I think so. We'll get out there and we'll see how we'll see how it looks. We're gonna go on course. We're gonna trim up. We're gonna see how the boat feels, and then hopefully we'll have plenty of time if we have to make a quick change. But that's probably just
No soft sails tonight. Probably no zeros even. Well, maybe in the transition in the middle, right?
I think that the zero and then tight soft sails probably need to be accessible. The one probably. And then, if it goes super light in the middle of the night, we'll be able to take whatever out and heat out. The GS needs to be handy because that thing's going to be like ready to go if we're cracked off and we start trimming out on the jib. And so we'll be quick to go with it. We'll be quick to strike it if it's not working. Right?
It's easy to put up and down.
Yeah.
one thing I neglected, we talked about safety. These guys have all been through this a number of times, but the basic drill is there's a trigger on the bottom of the John buoy back here behind the cooler. There's a latch on the bottom. All kinds of inflatable stuff comes flying up in the air. Somebody goes to the back of the boat and points. Somebody goes down below and starts throwing stuff that floats, our horseshoe buoy. Should we have that on deck? Probably should have that on deck. And we have the throwing sock down here behind the cooler as well. So just FYI on that.
With one of America's great sailors, Ken Reed, America's Cup, Dennis Conner, all the rest of it. You're still banging on boats. You're obviously on Heartbreaker. Bob's been on the show a couple times. What is it you like about sailing? What is it that makes you happy about sailing?
Well, I have to admit, quite a while ago, sailing for me went from like a passion to more of a job.
Right.
There's no question that sailing's a job. I actually own a powerboat at home, so I'd say it's fair to say I love the water, I love the ocean, but this is, racing is a job. Now, I still love to race. I think I love the competitive part of it. I love the teamwork part of it, the preparation, making fun little boats like this go fast.
Right.
That's a blast, and usually that turns into success.
You're a Boston University guy,
Yep.
and you're a small boat sailor to start with. Sort of take us through how you got in that boat the first time. And was it mom and dad that got it going?
Yeah, my mother and father, we were hockey players in the winter, my brother and I. My dad went to Brown, he was a hockey player at Brown and a sailor in the summer in Rhode Island. And we grew up on a little 30-foot cruising boat, a Pearson Wander, towed a dinghy, towed a sunfish. We had the sunfish rigged by the time the anchor went down in most harbors. And kind of got drafted to a couple colleges, but I wouldn't call myself a high-level person. And then just worked harder at it than anybody else. Figured out college sailing for me was my breakthrough. And then, like I tell kids all the time when I talk to kids, you just got to keep being successful. You got to be a team player, and you got to keep winning. And if you keep winning, whether it's in dinghies or for me, J24s or Etchels, and then 1-tonners, and then 2-tonners, and then maxi boats and Volvo. If you keep winning, you keep getting asked back. And it's really not brain surgery.
Is it something you're touched with? In other words, do you have that feel? Obviously, the knowledge at the highest levels, everybody's pretty in the same ballpark. We're involved in ski racing at the national levels, and you get 12 kids that are the best 12 in the country, and there's always 2 that are going to be better than the other 10.
Sure.
Is it an innate thing with you, or is it the learning process, or were you touched? Did somebody come down and touch you and say, "Hey, this is just a special guy"?
So you'd hope that your God's gift would be a doctor or some way to save the world and make the world a better place. For some reason, my brother and I were touched with the ability to make a boat go fast.
Okay.
And then I think for me the fun part was learning the evolution of a team, and that turned into how to run a team and then how to run a business. And so my career has really probably been more of a mix of the pro sailing and running a company than most. You go down the dock and every pro sailor here, they've never been involved with a company. Never mind, they're their own person, as their company. I'm different. I have a day. I always say I got a day job and a day job. I get to do a little of both, and that certainly comes from learning how to run a team, and that's not easy. It's hard.
More opportunities for young guys to become professional sailors. Where do you tell the 20-year-old that just graduated from college, 21-year-old that wants to get involved? Where does he start?
Just say yes. Say yes to every ride you can, and then when you become a power player on the boat, that hopefully you make that boat more successful. You make the owner happy, you make the owner's wife be happy, the crew loves you. They're going to talk on the dock, and before you know it, the next cool boat's going to give you a call, the next cool boat, and before you know it, somebody's going to call you to do a transatlantic crossing. You just have to keep being yourself, being a professional, and just say yes to everything. You can't hold out for the cool ride. That's
okay.
The biggest thing. Yeah, I think that because a lot of young pros hold out for the cool ride, and they end up sitting at home watching reruns of Gilligan's Island for weeks or months at a time instead of just getting out on another ride and becoming a preeminent player.
2 years ago, SailGP sent up in Chicago.
we asked a question during the press conference, which they thought I thought was the normal question, was unusual. That was, they'd always been in saltwater. We had talked about being in freshwater. Obviously, you're at the Queen's Cup 2024. You're in freshwater. They really didn't think about the viscosity between the salt. And the next day, I got an answer to the question. They actually went out and did some testing. You obviously have been a saltwater sailor. You like freshwater. This is a freshwater sailor. What do you like about freshwater that you don't like about saltwater?
I just like not feeling slimy within about 5 hours. You know, I remember this debate when I was younger, coming out and doing a Mac race, and it's like, no, saltwater, and then you go do like a Volvo, and you're so grimy within hours, never mind weeks or even months at a time. Our longest leg was 42 days. 42 days is a long time in salt water, feeling pretty crummy. I just love getting off the boat at the end of a race and essentially shaking your head and throwing on some clothes and going to the party. You know, it's a totally different experience. And I have to say, don't tell anybody, fresh water's really nice.
Well, to one of the best sailors in American history, you appreciate the time, and good luck today on the freshwater as a race. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go slow in reverse because it's real shallow just over here.
And I got some, you know, like I asked before, some guys that can jump out of the skin, hopefully.
As we're swinging around here, you can see downtown Milwaukee. It's headed up to the lake. You see the sails up on a lot of boats. What you just saw earlier was a check-in. We've got check-in on the boats. That's kind of the way that works. You can see out to the lake there. You can see all the boats all the way out. Get ready to race. Start here. You can kind of see behind me some of the boats in different places, kind of jockeying for position. We've been out here for an hour, just kind of checking sails. You get somebody, it's the people on the board. You're lucky enough to have one of the better professionals, and it's really fun to watch these guys operate because the GL52 fleets are so professional. Doesn't matter what boat you're on; they're all top class. Fun to get this boat moving across towards Southaven. So that being the case, take a look over my shoulder again. You see one more coming. I'm going to flip this a little bit. You see coming back around behind us. You see him.
Rolling to attack here.
See, we're talking with Eric Wynsma. We're on the back of his boat here in the middle of Lake Michigan, or almost the middle of Lake Michigan. The obvious question is, why do you do this? What is it that gets you jacked?
Well, I don't know. I've been doing it a lot of years, but obviously right now, if you scan your camera around, you're seeing a lot of my friends on the boat. Got a couple of my kids here. And this is just an awesome way to get to enjoy beautiful Lake Michigan, and the competitive part is fun as well.
All right. Well, here's the question. I know we've covered this fleet pretty well.
Yep.
You have exactly. I know you're a competitive guy, but you have this family thing going that I'm not sure the other boats have. Is that by design, or is it just the way you are?
No, I think that, well, Natalie Che Phil has a son.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No, I get that.
Dalton DeVos sails on Wynsma, so it's a common thing with those guys. But Doug has a couple times mentioned, how do you get your kids to want to sail with you all the time? He's got Dalton with him, and Dalton's fantastic. I've got two of my kids, and my younger daughter Jenna might hop on now and then for Harbor Springs and stuff like that.
I guess the observation, and again, I'm not disparaging anybody that's got their children on board, but it seems more family and less, I don't want to say professional, because I don't think that's a fair word, but it seems like a different atmosphere than the other boats.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a little softer, more, this is definitely a family. We're all basically, for the most part, we're West Michigan based. We have a couple of Detroit guys. But yeah, it definitely feels like a family, and if it didn't feel that way, it would be less interesting.
The fleet obviously is growing. You're looking at having maybe a more professional fleet with a Corinthian fleet.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about the owners. This is a really special group of guys.
Yeah, the owner group is really cool. We have a little bit of a changing mix as the fleet grows. We're going to have some new challenges to get through, but this was originally started. Phil O'Neill had the first 52 on the Great Lakes and sailed that very successfully. They went up and down the lake and won everything for a long time. Bob Hughes got sick of watching that, and he was kind of done with his Par 40 projects. He bought the Heartbreaker. I think the third boat then was WindQuest. Doug had a training campaign and a new boat being built, so he shipped that one over here. I think that was kind of the start of the class, and then Chris Duhon with Mockingbird, and then we showed up with this thing. Dr. Tam is the newest boat. Legacy joined us last year out of Racine, and we have a couple out-of-towners coming. We have a boat called Nimbus coming from Buffalo, New York, to join. They'll be more like our team. It's more amateur, friends and family style, like us and Legacy as well. So it's growing.
We should also point out that while we're talking about being a family atmosphere, you've got some guys on this boat that know how to sail. There's some serious talent on this boat as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess the point is, don't get the idea that this is, you're bringing everybody out for a Sunday cruise, because a boat this size, and it should be said, the boats this size, if you don't know what you're doing, it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, they're dangerous. The loads here, like on this running backstay that your right foot is leaning on, that's loaded up to, whatever that is at the moment, 10 or 11,000 pounds.
Yeah.
6 ton or whatever. It's pretty bound up. So this wouldn't be a good boat for just somebody that didn't have a history in some higher performance boats leading up to it. They can be a little much.
Because the fleets are growing around the world, the other part of it is, I think, cost is coming down. Because boats are cheaper than they were 5 years ago.
Well, yeah, the older boats obviously just keep getting older.
Yeah.
So the price now isn't based on age even as much as condition and what kind of racing shape that they're in. But yeah, they are definitely getting cheaper. You can get a project boat now very inexpensively.
I know you like to sail. It's part of what we do at the winter time. So I guess the simplest question to finish the interview: sailing or sailing? If you had a choice between sailing or skiing, which would it be?
Both.
Okay.
Cool people are doing both for sure.
Appreciate the opportunity.
transition of windows back. Yeah, it's right back to where it was before the race. Just went through the transition zone. I guarantee that's true of good places these days. Natalie J did a really good job, obviously, but it was always short. I don't know, it had to have gone through a transition.
It was a blur. I have a feeling I was kind of down, hood down most of the race. On the skateboard.
You did your grinding, you did your muscle work, you did.
We're talking with Skip Diebel, one of the renowned sailors in the Midwest. Skip here and kind of helping out with usual suspects here in Lake Michigan, just getting through the Queen's Cup 2024. Thoughts on the boat and just the experience? And this is your first time on the boat with these guys.
Yeah. Great team. Had a lot of fun. The boat's a lot of fun to sail. It's a big dinghy. It's really right in my wheelhouse. I sail small boats normally. Everything's tweaky. Everything's responsive. It's really a lot of fun. Sailing with these guys was awesome. The race was very challenging tonight. We had rain all night long, and a couple spots of no wind, a couple spots where it was really breezy, and we changed gears pretty well, and didn't have a whole lot of luck, but we had a lot of fun, so it was really a lot of fun.
Talk briefly about a boat like this and I don't want to call it finicky because I think that's an unfair word, but certainly you got to know what you're doing. This is really a power sled, for lack of a better term.
It's so the loads on the boat and the speeds that it generates, and the efficiency of the foils and the rig and the sails, everything adds up to really. You gotta know what you're doing, and you gotta be aware, and you gotta feel the boat. When you make a change, you gotta really recognize whether or not it was a good change. And so, for me, I learned a lot tonight because we were making a lot of changes, and we were watching the speeds adjust accordingly. And so, it was a good shakedown for us for the MAC races. That's what we used it for, and learned a lot, and we had a lot of fun.
It's also fair to say this is a race that had a lot of challenges, everything from wind to rain beyond belief, and a number of things. So it was probably a good tune-up.
Yeah, I think 0 to 20 probably on the range of the breeze, and then we had a lot of chop on the first beat, first fetch. It's a one-legged race, but on the fetch, early in the race we had a lot of chop, but and then late in the race, when the rain squalls came through, it was like there was some breeze on one side, but nothing on the other, and that's summertime Lake Michigan. It's a lot of fun. It was super dark night, so you couldn't really see what was coming or where you were going. So it was challenging, and it was fun, and it's different sailing, and that's what makes it cool.
Thanks, Kip. Welcome back. We're talking with Kelvin McGee. She is one of the crew members on Fast Tango here in the Detroit area for Bayview Yacht Club with Tim Profit. But Kellen, you just had an unbelievable opportunity to place first place in the cruising division in the Newport Bermuda race, which just came off, and some pretty high-profile boats in that race. And first of all, congratulations, and kind of talk us through what the race was like.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it was first place in the cruising class 2 in the Finisterre division. And so the boat, this was really the entire race was really a lesson for having the right boat for the conditions. We were fortunate enough to be on an absolutely gorgeous family boat. It's a 10-hood design, Lyman Morris Sigan 49, 1994-ish era. And it's gorgeous, but also weighs 25 tons. It's 50,000 pounds, which is over twice as heavy as anything I have ever had experience racing before. So you can imagine I was a little bit apprehensive going into a race on something of that magnitude, and just in terms of sheer mass. But in the week running up to the race, with the family, we were working with the navigator and looking at all this different Gulf Stream predictions and all the different wind predictions that we were going to have for the race. And we were expecting some amount of pressure, but not about the 25 knots plus that generally makes this boat go. But by the time we got to the race course, we had a little bit of a lighter start. So the race was start off the point where the fort is located, and it was really quite exciting because on the starting line, we were circling around, not all in the same start, but as we were all milling around waiting for the start, there were 3 Mod 70s. I mean, there were three Volvo 70s, and then all the way on down to this like small little 30-foot family cruiser was all on the start line. It was the most diverse fleet of boats I'd ever seen. It was really quite something. And then, it's a 3-masted schooner going around. There's a couple other ketches and these, beautiful New York 12s hanging around. There's a couple, I think it was a New York 36. It was just such a spectrum from, class 40s to wooden boats to Volvo 70s, all the way down to these little, little Tartan 37s. So that was kind of my first indication. That was where the race really started to feel like a big deal, just the sheer magnitude of boats that were out there. But we were kind of headed into a lighter start, and we were starting further up the river than we typically do. And so the process of getting out of the river was actually exactly what a lot of Great Lakes sailors would recognize as the experience of racing in the Detroit River. You get little puffs here and there, you get nothing, you have to like play the shifts and then try and not put yourself into position to get washed onto the rocks while you're waiting for the next puff. One puff is upwind, the next one's downwind. Some people popped kites to try and, sort their way out. We had an adverse current at that time, so we were going backwards for a little while, looking at some rocks. It took us about, a couple hours to make any progress past a radar mast that was on land. So, very classic, actually, Lake St. Clair starting feeling. But as soon as we got out of that and we got out into the water proper, we were, it built pretty quickly to about 15 to 20 and then on up. At which point we put up our number 3 and just kind of went. The plan was the Gulf Stream didn't really change the tactics very much. It didn't provide, options. There was one area in the Gulf Stream, it was the meander that was lined up pretty much in the direction of the rum line. And so the plotting for trying to hit the Gulf Stream was relatively straightforward. There were some subtleties associated with where some of the max current was within the Gulf Stream itself that indicated that it was a little bit more advantageous to stay west to, our navigator, to whom I give an enormous amount of credit for our having done so well. And so we knew we wanted to approach it favoring the west, and even a little bit west of where most of the boats had decided where west was, because there was, again, the little bit in the actual data that we'd been looking at up into, not the predictions, but the actual observations leading up to the race. It had shown there's a little bit more current, even within the main current area to the west. So we aimed, yeah.
I was going to say, that's relatively important. They started running this race in 1906. It's one of the great world races, but one of the other things about the race is that it's one of those few races that you don't really see much on land.
Right.
And so you get a true open water experience. And I think that's something that is rather unique about the race, especially get a chance to go by something as simple as, Newport's Fort Myers as you're taking off, or Fort Adams, actually. So it's a pretty cool place.
Yeah, well, no, and that point is very valid, and I would say a lot of sailors would agree with me that the absolute most amazing experience of this race is the Gulf Stream. You hit it, and suddenly the air goes from being cold to being hot. Suddenly the water goes from being 65-ish to 80, like within a couple boat lengths, and you're in it. And not only that, you've got the current flowing in 4-ish knots in a certain direction, and then the wind was flowing against that direction. So the wave state totally changes the instant you get into the current. And we were kind of hitting that in the evening, I think. And that was by far one of the most fun experiences of the races, because by that point it had built to, 20-ish, 25, maybe gusting a little bit further. And this boat was just absolutely loving these waves. It was, big 2-meter seas, relatively large period, but adverse, coming into your bow. We were going pretty close hauled at that time. And that's where the benefit of being a 25-ton boat really began to stand out, because this thing just rolled over the waves in the most comfortable way possible. Like, I spent a lot of time driving this race. I was one of the primary drivers, and you pick your way through the waves as you know how to do as a relatively competent driver. But those waves that you couldn't miss, I'm used to slapping those things or banging into those things in the Great Lakes, and this boat just went right through them. You didn't feel it at all. So you could really tell that this boat loved these conditions. You just leaned it over, put the rail in the water, and we were going with the current. We were going 12 to 13 in this thing, which was probably about 8 8.5 to 9 through the water, and it just felt like a freight train. It boat just loved it. We had the right sails, they were trimmed right, and it was just, we were just flying. So yeah, that was, the Gulf Stream was by far the most amazing part of this race. And that's where you start to see a lot of the marine life as well. You get dolphins and porpoises that come and say hi to you. You know, up until that point, you don't see that much, but as soon as you hit the Gulf Stream, it changes in that way too.
Kelly, you kind of came to you didn't have a dinghy background. We should mention that you went to high school in a Maxi school in Bloomfield. You're a particle physicist, so obviously you're smarter than the rest of us. Now, having not had this experience at lower, with smaller boats and sort of coming to sailing late, you're in a race where you see Roy Disney's Paywacket. You see a number of boats that certainly have international acclaim. That's pretty heady company, to say the least.
It meant a lot to line up against Pyewacket again. It was actually the second time I've done it, because Pyewacket was on the line last year on Transpac, as they always are, except that was their Santa Cruz 70. They brought their Volvo 70 to this race, which, having experienced the race, I quite understand why. Apparently they brought their Santa Cruz 70 once or twice to this race, and this swore they'd never do it again, because that thing was built to go downwind. This is almost an entirely upwind heavy race. And so, they brought a little bit of a different knife to that fight. But yeah, that was, again, getting back to the sense of finally understanding the significance of this race on that start line. And you saw the programs around that you noticed, and you realized, wow, this actually does mean a lot to be here.
So since you've done the Transpac, this was about, your timing, and this was what, 2 days, day and a half, 3 days?
We were 3 days, elapsed time. It was 3 days, 18 hours. Okay. Corrected 2 hours and something, or 2 days and something. Yeah. So we started, the start was like, the start was 3:10 for this class, was 3:10 p.m. on Friday. And we finished sometime around 5, 6 a.m. on Monday. So, I mean, it's a little bit longer than a long MAC race, but not by an order of magnitude, So, but particularly at the speed we were going.
You mentioned you spent a little bit of time as a principal driver in this particular race. You are primarily a bow person in what you do, so you're obviously getting some opportunities to be different parts of the boat. That's got to be helpful to your to other parts of what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. For some reason, I kind of fell into the driving role. I really like it. I learned to drive in pretty adverse conditions, because my first couple opportunities on the helm came when the crew was sick, people were injured, we were running out of drivers, and those conditions only happen when it's, really terrible upwind pounding in the upper part of Lake Huron. And so that's where I learned, was often out of duress, and I found out that I actually really like those conditions and fairly decent at them. So it's actually weirder, it's weirder for me to be driving without waves than it is to be driving in waves. So I've really grown into, trying to, develop myself as a driver as well, because I know I can't do bow forever, but I am primarily a bow person. But the bow work on this race was actually quite simple. We never had a kite up, and we bounced between the 1 and the 3 a couple times, which is a lot harder to do on this boat than it is to do on a racing boat, or even a boat with big head sails like Fats Tango. These head sails are that big or bigger, and way heavier as big deck round things. So the energy calculation that one did in terms of whether or not to change sails for certain conditions was much different on this boat, just because it was such an arduous task. But it was fun. But yeah, so without much to do on the bow, we all kind of became drivers in some sense, and myself and one other person who was on the boat were the people with the most actual racing experience, as opposed to more family cruising style experience. And so we ended up trading the helm a lot.
I wanted to ask that, when you're starting from a little bit of knowledge in the middle of when you start your career, you're a particle physicist, so I don't think confidence is an issue when you get into something. So certainly when you get into sailing, having accomplished what you've done academically and professionally, you certainly are a confident person. But my question is does your science background and your science education certainly give you a heads up? Because anybody, we just got through with the Queen's Cup.
Yep.
And I'm a sailor, but I sat on the back of the 52, and if somebody would ask me to do a job, I'd have panicked, because I don't know, right? And I think that comes anybody stepping into something new is a confidence factor. But when you step on these boats, was there that confidence from education that certainly helped you with sailing, and certainly in the beginning?
It's a very good question, and I think part of it is that some of it works almost the other way around. My ability to kind of approach problems experimentally and think about them while I'm working on something that I use on boats, and I learned that on boats well before I became, I got a PhD in particle physics, particle accelerator physics. And so I think it was actually kind of the other way around, in that me and my affinity for sailing and the practical type of problem solving that it rewards, it made it clear to me that, at least within physics in my professional career, experimental work was, much more in my wheelhouse. I certainly had any interest or being a theorist and just working out theory or equations or computer programs. Being an experimentalist means you're actually building things, troubleshooting things, setting things up, taking them down, trying to think through what could be going wrong on your feet. And that was, the first thing that I liked so much about boats, is that you were also looking at boats and not figuring out, equations on paper. You were just building an intuition of where the load's going. What happens when you pull this thing? What happens when you leave this thing off? What would help the draft, change the shape of the sail better? And then as the boats that I'm on have been sort of scaling up in size and weight and, sheer power factor, the way you think about those loads changes, and the way you think about how you approach moves changes, because there's, what you're doing is so much heavier. You need to care a lot more about where you're loading things up on the boat. Where's that load going? I like that mechanical thinking about boats, and it is definitely related to being in physics, but I think I'm good at physics because I happen to be good at boats. So it's definitely a two-way street.
As the sailing addiction becomes stronger, part of, if you're a professional, getting time off, you must have a great vacation plan, or you must use all your days.
I have to budget my days so carefully. One of these days, well, and the trouble is all the vacation days go to efforts like sailing, which are not vacation in any sense. It's just if you're racing hard for 3 days and you come back to work, you are not less tired than when you left.
No.
But I'm also very fortunate in that I came into the professional world at the same time that we were making this massive shift towards remote work, and also, a lot of facility with video conferencing, and with the number of international collaborators and the number of people that I work with on campus anyway that are pretty much email based. I have more flexibility than I would have before 2020 to be able to take a laptop on a boat, catch up with my email on the way to the start, or be at a yacht club at whatever the destination was, catch up on emails, do some Zoom interviews, or do some Zoom calls and that kind of thing. So I really, really use the flexibility that is afforded by that. And it's very lucky, one of the very few good things that came out of the pandemic was that this mental shift towards allowing people to do something like that. So it's absolutely enabling. But I could use more vacation time. I really could.
I think the cool part of this sort of Walter Mitty story is that I could practice forever and never be on the PGA Tour, but like you said, you come to the sport later in life, and you're competing at the highest levels, and that's kind of a cool sort of avenue for other folks who might want to consider being able to do that, because there's folks doing it now.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it really all comes down to the people you happen to meet on the way and the mentorship that they are able to provide. I was, as you mentioned earlier, I sail with Tim Profit on Fast Tango, and the group of people that he's accumulated on that boat were absolutely instrumental for me to, develop myself as a racer in general and a bow person in particular. My dear mentor, Dan Moons, I met on Fast Tango, and he's, been around the block back in the day and absolutely understands what one should do on big boats as a bow person, and being able to ask him questions or being able to sail with him. I learn something new every time I'm on Tango with him. And I recognize that so many people don't have that opportunity. People who have that skill set are aging out of sailing generally. So people who need to know how to run bow, or particularly on older boats, or how to drive older boats. It was very lucky for me to meet these people on Tango, and they're always very willing to they're looking for people to teach. And it just, it really matters if you're able to find that source of information and use it or not. So we're very lucky in Detroit. I've noticed that we have so many people who are experienced in those boats, partially just because of the sailing history that we have in Detroit and Lake St. Clair in particular. As I traveled around either in Cleveland, kind of been embedded in that community or been embedded in the Chicago community. There are, obviously pockets of this, but Detroit there's a really deep field of sailors there to learn from, and we're very lucky to have that.
Tim has an amazing crew, but as we've done now about 135 shows over the last 2 or 3 years, to get a chance to interact with these different groups. They would have never been familiar to me if we don't do this show, but there's a number of folks and a number of crews that are absolutely amazing. And one of the things that keeps popping up in my head, especially when we interview, national, international stars, is I keep asking the question: is do people realize the talent in the Great Lakes? And
yeah,
the guys in the know do. I'm not sure the rest of us do. Or, and I say the rest of us, the sort of casual sailor on Lake St. Clair, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, but there's some serious talent here. So it's been fun to be able to have that conversation. So, last couple questions. I'm assuming you're doing the Chicago and both the Bayview to Mackinac, both those races.
Yeah. Yep. We're doing Chicago Mac plus the Super Mac on Fast Tango, which I believe that's the second. Yeah, that'll be the second time that we do Super Mac on Fast Tango. And then I'm doing Bayview Mac actually on the boat that I mentioned previously, the 1984 Shock 41 that my friends and I have restored. This will be our first Mackinac on that boat. So we're very excited that our first Mackinac on that boat is going to be the 100th race. So it's been a dream of ours ever since we purchased the boat and started working on it in 2020. So it means a lot to us for this to finally get her to a Mackinac line, which is another, type of sailing entirely, going from, these well-established programs to your own little program with your own, group of people that you're trying to grow. So it's a different challenge yet again. So I'm looking forward to it.
I find it interesting this year. This race, the Bermuda race, started in 1906. Mm-hmm. The end of the 1800s, there must have been something, because if you look at all these races, there was the 100th Mac, the 100 Mills, this race in 1906, 116th. All of a sudden, they must have decided in the early part of the 19th century that sail racing was probably better than whatever else they were doing, because all of these races sort of founded into that 100 to 120 year mark. And it must have been some pretty cool people back then to finally decide it's easier to race than fight with each other.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting for this race in particular, because I'm not sure if, as has been pointed out, this is exactly 100 years ago, the founding members of Bayview Yacht Club went and raced in this race and won their class as well. So exactly 100 years later, there's another member, myself, who was able to be on a boat that won their class. So there was a nice symmetry in that. But it was interesting you mentioned the time period, because the starting line on the Bermuda race in particular was dominated by well-appointed modern racing boats. Your typical carbon, apart from the historical boats and, the cruisers like us, there was a, huge contingent of modern racing boats. And a upwind beat for, 4-ish days into heavy winds and high seas is just not what those boats are built for in many ways. And so they tend to arrive in Bermuda going, oh man, that was a terrible race. We were getting beat up the entire way there. And then you sort of think about it and you realize when this race was established, the majority of boats were these big, heavy cruising boats. And it was essentially a Cruising Club of America race. So the race was founded with boats like the one I was on in mind. And so it's a little bit of an anachronism that we have these race boats on the race. So it's a little bit, no wonder they get beat up. I mean, the race was slightly more orientated towards the heavy cruising boat. And I have to say, the wonderful cooking and all of the other, things that we had on the boat, were great. But the thing that made this race the most comfortable was just being the right heavy boat for the course. We didn't slam any waves. We just rolled through everything. You could really tell this was what this boat was built for. And we had a great trip. We had a great trip down.
That's good. Well, listen, congratulations on the win. And we certainly wish you the best of luck, both in the upcoming MAC races. So hopefully maybe our paths will cross. We'll say hello. And for that, have a great, successful summer.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Wanted to take a couple of seconds to say thank you to Kelly McGee and all of her travels down through the Newport to Bermuda race. It's really a treat to talk to her. Hopefully we'll have her on next few weeks with a couple of the larger races. And I really wanted to take a couple of seconds out to thank Eric Wynsma, because he's one of those captains in the 52 fleet. I know we kind of gush over it. For me, it was an opportunity to sit behind that boat and see just how professional the GL 52 fleets are. We've had a chance to ride on Bob's boat. We've interacted with almost all the captains. There's not a better owner base that I can think of. But what really stood out to me in a Corinthian format, which is what Eric really talks about, because it's he and family. It's Murphy, it's Ella Baker, it's Skip Diebel, it's Ron Sherry. I'm going to come back to Ron in a second. Steve Rozelle, Casey McGovern, great East Grand Rapids, the great coach, ski coach, alpine ski coach from East Grand Rapids. It was fun to get on a boat and talk a little bit about skiing with him. Henry Shane, Matt Rolston. I'm missing a few, I'm sure. It was really fun to meet all of those guys. And certainly Sam Nadeau is probably the best example. Sam and I got a chance then coming back to Makatawa to spend some time talking about U.S. sailing. He's just a wonderful lawyer and certainly a veteran. He has a niece that's going to be sailing in the upcoming 2024 Paris Olympics. But this crew, you don't think of it in terms of we get on the boat, think in terms of the professional crew that might have been a paid crew, like they have some of the other GL 52 fleets, but no less devoted, passionate about the sport. And it was just really an eye-opener to show me that's just how much they love the sport. I know I've been on the fence about racing. I don't want to race. I sit in the rain in the middle of the night. But when I see Ella Baker, probably the most elegant young ladies you'll ever see, climb 90 feet up, make sure they got a light for that evening. This is just a really fun experience. I hope that it comes through in terms of what we see. We're going to follow the 52 fleet because I think it's maybe one of the better fleets in the world. It's not the Mediterranean fleet, but certainly the second best fleet in the world. AAA baseball is how we've described it, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity. And to watch Ron Sherry, who's one of the great world's ice boaters, and how he operates in sort of a subtle way that he is. I say that because he's a member of Crescent with me. It was such a treat to watch him operate. Skip Diebel, just a terrific guy. I know I sound like a public relations firm, but this is really an experience that I don't think I'm going to forget. I don't know that I'll be back on one of those boats because in the Bronco seat, for some better part of now in the last couple of weeks, probably 15 hours, at the age of 70, you find your butt doesn't always find its way home. But to Eric and all those folks on deck, to Ron Sherry, to Skip, to all of them, Sam and certainly the rest of the crew, and then a chance to talk to Ken Reed, Skip, and all the rest of them. I just wanted to thank all of them. So this was a treat. We will be upcoming with some of the big races coming relatively soon. And for all the guys in back, thank you for a lifetime opportunity. And Eric, you're the best. Thanks.